everybody. Welcome to the 6th class of Esoteric Psychology. And first off, announcements is there's no handouts this week. There's not really, I think there's like one definition. So I just decided not to do any handouts, so you can get in. And then the other thing I wanted to say was last week, some people had made some comments that were really interesting that when I thought about them later, I kind of agreed with them, like something that Renee had said about eating junk food and then satisfying that desire with a healthy meal. That started to sink in later, and it really made sense. And I don't think I reacted, last week I was probably in my head about something else. So anyway, I just wanted to say that. That a lot of the comments that people said last week, I kind of agree with. I think about them later on, and then it makes sense to me. That's what I usually have to do. I have to think about things for a long, long time before, before they make sense. And then I go, yeah, exactly, that's right. So I just wanted to say that. And I think that's it for announcements. Oh, I do want to mention Allie's Facebook page, because she has a link for the Church of Light, and you can go onto Facebook and become a friend of the Church of Light on Facebook. I think you have to go through Allie's, I'm not sure, Allie's Facebook page, but it's Allie McCrae. It's her Facebook. You could just search for it.
Yeah, maybe just send an email to the Church of Light and say you're interested in the Facebook, and then Christina or one of us can send them the link.
Yeah, but people can search on Facebook, and all they have to do is type in Alan McCrae, A-L-L-Y-N McCrae.
Oh, okay.
And then Allie's picture should come up, and then you can go to her and then request her as a friend, and then you can be a friend of the Church of Light.
Is that how it works?
Yeah.
Oh.
I think so.
Because I was thinking she was had put something on that was just for the Church of Light, but maybe not.
Yeah, there is. So you can look it up just as Church of Light as well, I believe. But, yeah. All right. So with that, I think we'll start our PowerPoint presentation as per usual. Chapter 6, How to Rule the Stars. Okay, so understanding the kind of influence exerted by the stars and deciding what steps to take in character building enables us to respond in the desired manner to the astral environment, not by the planet's positions. It remains for us only to act upon this knowledge to rule our stars. We can't prevent the planets from radiating the energies, they most certainly do, but we can learn what those energies are and how they influence human life. We can then take proper steps to utilize those energies so that they will work not against us, but in a direction that will be to our advantage.
Well, that sounds real simple, doesn't it?
I know, he simplified right in the beginning. I was like, hey! And then he has a whole chapter kind of explaining this. Okay. To a great extent, we have harnessed the wind to propel our ships and power our windmills, and devised air conditioning and artificial heating systems to comfort us during extreme weather conditions. We do not prevent the various forces of nature from acting, but through our knowledge, we are learning to adapt ourselves rather successfully to these and other environmental forces. So too can we do the same thing by learning about the stars and their energies, and how they influence us, and how we can adapt to those influences to make them work for us.
Hang on just a minute, we're looking it down, it's so figuring out.
Like the weather on Earth, the position of the planets determine the astral environment, the astral weather, so to speak, at any given time. So kind of remember this, it's the astral environment that the planets determine. It's kind of like how the weather conditions on Earth are. How that invisible environment, the astral weather, affects a person, however, is not determined by a birth chart or progressions, but is determined by a person's reactions to those events, which are mapped by progressions. Just as one can get out of the rainstorm and stay dry, so one can see what the astral weather is and get out of the astral storm, so to speak. So that's part of the reason why we're learning about the planets. So we know what's coming, and then we know how to react to it and get out of the storm. The planets each broadcast a special type of energy, but the planets are not responsible for the individual character which a person is born with, nor are they responsible for the events which enter later in a person's life. Just like the weather doesn't control you, control everything you do, it just affects you and you react to it. And that's exactly what the astrology does, right? It influences you, but it doesn't cause you to do something. You do something on your own based on maybe what the weather conditions are. So what the birth chart does do is it maps the more important factors or characteristics of the person's character, and the aspects map the chief relations of experiences to each other. The human birth is merely one cross-section of the soul's journey through time. The soul has existed before and will exist after human incarnation. So the soul developed its character as a result of all the experiences it's had in the other forms and on other planes of existence up to the time of the human physical birth. So remember, that's what our birth chart is showing. The planets' positions are showing what our previous soul's journey has made, and it maps that. So that's what the birth chart is showing you. So you're going to have all those inclinations and all those abilities and obstacles based on the past soul experiences, and that the birth chart just maps it, and then you can determine based on that map. Oh, look at the map. Where am I heading? Right? And you go on the journey. Okay. So these past soul experiences organize themselves into the thought cells and thought structures of the astral body and constitute the soul, the mind, character, the unconscious mind. Remember, I keep putting that in every slide, so you're going to be knowing that for like a long time. The soul then comes into human existence at that specific time that the planets are accurately mapping the dynamic stellar thought structures of the astral body, which were determined by the past soul experiences. So it's a map. The birth chart does not map the characteristics that are added to the soul after the time of birth. So all the things that you're adding based on your experiences in your life, those are mapped by progressions, right? And transits, but we don't talk about transits, but I think
in the way you respond to them.
Right. And then your way to respond to them. So understanding the planet's positions is important to understand the astral weather. But your reaction to the astral weather is more important in determining how best these events play out in your life. So you take an umbrella with you when there's a storm, and you're prepared, and that way you don't have to run out of the rain right away. You're prepared, and you can walk, with your umbrella, but stay out of the storm. That's one way of looking at it. So I like this chapter. This chapter was easy compared to the other ones. I was like, oh, shoot. It's more like astrology. Okay. So, and then I just wanted to reiterate and recap. A person's character is not caused by the position of the planets at birth. A person's character is caused by past soul experiences in other forms and is only mapped by the positions of the planets at the time of one's birth. And what events come into a person's life throughout their life is not caused by progressed planets. What events do come into a person's life is determined by two factors, one of which is only mapped by the progressed planets. So again, our astrology is a map. So the two factors involved in the events that come into an individual's life is, one, the organization of thought cells within a person's astral body, which is the soul, mind, character, and conscious, and the environment, both physical and astral, to which that soul, mind, character, and conscious reacts to. So, things in our regular physical world happen, and we also react to that. That creates experiences, and that goes into our unconscious and our soul. So, and then there's astral environment, the astrology, which also affects us. So both of those affect us. If the environment remains the same, but the organization of thought cells changes, something different will be made to happen in a person's life. For example, like misfortune indicated by progressed aspects can be made to attract fortunate events by diverting the energies mapped by these aspects into other channels, which changes the organization of the thought cells of the astral body. So if your environment stays the same, but your thoughts change, and I think when he's talking about the reorganization of thought cells, I think that's almost like a change in your thought patterns, is my understanding, because in this chapter he talks a lot about organization of thought cells.
Does he mean like the aspects between the planets, what the prior conditioning is, and
I think so. But I mean, like throughout this whole chapter, he talks a lot about the organization, and because you can change the organization. See,
right.
And in my mind, that means you change the way your thinking is. And I guess it can also be involved in the planet's positions that can help you change your thinking, maybe.
Right, I'm thinking that, I know that he talks about, I mean, although it must be very difficult to do, that you can change, if you're very skillful, you can change the energy of an opposition into a trine. So, and that would be changing the organization of thought cells.
Okay.
Because it's the thought cell compounds.
Oh, yeah.
That are mapped, are mapped in the birth chart. I think that's my understanding of it.
Yeah, he talks a lot about that. So okay, so we'll talk more about that because I think that's all throughout this chapter. Okay. So I think you're right. Okay, so that's what I was talking about. Thoughts. All right. So in the previous lesson, we've considered that the urges of thought cells, the desires, and thought structures and other organizations within the astral form help determine the actions of a person, and also how those energies can be diverted into desired activities once a person selects the direction in which the desired energies should express. Last week, I remember I stopped on sublimation, and I didn't get through the whole chapter, but there's a few slides that I added to this presentation that talks about sublimation. So if you're wondering about that, I said I was going to go over it. So it's in a couple of slides, so don't worry. We'll cover that a little bit about sublimation. So I just wanted to tell you about that. So yeah, and last week we talked about desires of the thought cells, thought structures, and that they determine the actions of a person. What your desire is usually in what direction you're going to go. But many of the events that come into a person's life cannot always be traced to our own thoughts and actions. Sometimes they can be due to actions of others and to conditions in the physical environment over which we have no control. So, granting that many things happen which are beyond our control, such as wars and earthquakes, yet how our lives are affected by such events is not due to chance. This is the 1920s.
The Depression.
The banks closing. I found some Hollywood pictures. Everybody's outside waiting for their money.
And waiting.
The way we are affected by such events and other events, such as our money being in a bank that fails, accidents, sickness in the family, unasked for opportunities, all are determined not by chance, but by the interplane activities of the thought cells and thought structures of our astral form. So, again, our thoughts control how we will be affected by such disasters. I think it also, not just our thoughts, but our reactions to such disasters. So we want to know what is in our thoughts, what thoughts are in our subconscious, and also the direction those thoughts are taking us into. So, I think one of the things is to really start being objectively conscious about where your thoughts are taking you, because especially as an adult, we started forming those patterns, and we don't pay attention anymore to how our thoughts are taking us. Really starting to look at those thoughts, I think, can really help you decide in what direction you want to go. Otherwise, you're just kind of floating around and going to what you established as patterns before, which I think is very interesting to really look at where your thoughts are going. So, that which we are inclined to attribute to chance is never such, but always the working of a hidden law. And this hidden law, which governs the events and circumstances that enter into every person's life, is that which relates to the release of desire energy on the inner plane. This hidden law works from the inner plane to attract into the life those conditions which are the desires of the thought cells and thought structures. So, this is the part where I was saying that this hidden law works in the inner plane to attract into life those conditions which are the desires of the thought cells and thought structures. But, there's also things going on the inner plane that you're interacting, your astral body is interacting with the astral plane. Maybe that's what you're talking about. That's the astrology.
I think. Maybe.
Okay.
There are these, he talks, throughout the books, he talks about dynamic stellar cells, or thought compounds, or thought structures, and and the way they come together with harmony or discord or neutrality.
Right. So if we think about it, so there's desires within the thought cells of our astral body going on, and then there's the astral weather on the astral plane that is going on.
Right.
So there's all these factors affecting us. So our desires are taking us in this one direction, in the thought plane, and yet the astral weather might be coming against us. So it's not just the direction. We're not going just in the direction of our desires.
Right.
There's other things going on that can affect in what direction we're going, right?
Or you could be going in the direction of your desire, and there's a big storm ahead.
Right.
And you're looking at that storm. You actually see that if you're looking at a chart, you go, there's a storm coming in, but I want this thing,
Right.
And you keep going for it, and it's like, well, let's see who's stronger, the storm or you.
You might be pushing against that wind, just going strong. I'm going to go there.
I've done that. I'm sure everybody else has done it.
Right? And sometimes,
you get beat up a little bit.
But sometimes the best thing that happens is when you're pushing through,
Yeah, no, exactly, right.
The best results happens. Alright, so that's that. Alright. So every thought cell, thought structure, and thought organization within the unconscious mind. Now remember, the unconscious mind is the astral body, right? So it's the same thing.
Right.
Think of it as your mind. It is your astral body. Has within it energy stored and under tension, desired energy. So if you know Zane, we're kind of backtracking and he's reiterating what desire is and how it plays out in cells. So these energies under tension strain for release. I like this. This is from the 20s or 30s when the Depression was hit.
Oh, yeah.
This is one of the cartoons in one of the magazines. So it's like bank robbing.
Even bank robbers get right.
And when the thought cells gain enough additional energy, and then there's two ways to add additional energy, through more thoughts added to them or by planetary vibrations, they spill over into unusual activity. So again, we're going to talk about morality. Later in other lessons, it will be indicated that true morality is conduct beneficial to the human race. But the benefit an individual can render others is not determined by his physical actions alone. Beneficial conduct can also be determined by the events that are attracted through the inner plane activities of the thought cells in the astral body.
So does that mean like thinking positive, like if you're thinking harmoniously or positively about something, you're contributing to?
Right.
Is that what that means?
Yeah, I think it's in the next slide. Okay, this is what he's talking about. If the inner plane activities attract those conditioned opportunities which enable a person to avoid disaster and live to one's maximum usefulness, then the inner plane activities have been more conducive in the direction of true morality than would be in the mere following of any physical line of conduct which can be changed by unforeseen circumstances. And this is what I was going to talk about, I think, was the example I thought of is like your own actions. So you think you're doing something moral, and your own actions take you to, like, say you have a relative that's heavily in debt, and you give them a lot of money, thinking I'm doing something moral and helping out my family to get out of debt, and they take their money and they don't get out of debt and they go gamble it. So your actions, even though it's showing morality, maybe, all of a sudden your relative now has a gambling problem and goes more into debt. So what your actions alone do is not necessarily, you're acting in your thoughts of morality, but Zane, I think, is talking about maximum usefulness, then the inner plane activities. So he's also talking about the inner plane activities going on can help you in your moral actions.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. What that makes me think of is that Dorothy always talked about how the new, there was a golden rule.
Yeah.
Called do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Right.
And she's modified that to say there's a platinum rule, which is to do and think unto others as you would have them do and think unto you.
I like that.
Which is and so what that's acknowledging is that whole notion that you can be looking at somebody and treating them really well, but if you're thinking that thought, it's
there you go,
that's
right?
where power comes from.
I like that a lot. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's what Zane is talking about. The inner plane activities attract those conditions. So if you looked at the chart of your relative and you saw like all this planetary energy in the 5th house, that's when you might not want to give them money, and you might develop a gambling problem,
right.
and worse off. So you have to think about what you're doing. Realizing what people are going through, and sometimes people have to do things the hard way in their own way, and just helping everybody out is not always the answer. Giving to people that need to learn to do for themselves, right?
Yeah.
All right. So to live the highest type of moral life by benefiting society and oneself, the individual should sublimate the grosser desires until they flow into channels of physical action of noble purpose, and should also recondition those thought cells that tend to attract misfortune into one's life, so that instead the thought cells will work with equal energy from the inner plane to attract into the life those events which are most conducive to spirituality, happiness, and true success. And, so Zane is talking about true morality is you help society and yourself, because if you can live to the best of your ability and find spirituality, happiness, and success, that's going to help people as well. It's going to help others. And that's what he's saying that true morality is. Now, you guys just be careful, though. I wrote about true success. The only thing is I'm going to say about that is be careful of how you define true success, because everybody's definition of true success is not going to be the same. I feel very successful in my life, and I just turned 40. and I just have a regular job and just, going about my life. But I feel very successful because it's in the direction I want to go. Now, somebody may look at me and says, oh, you're not top of corporate America, you don't have a lot of money, you don't have investments, all that. But that's not true success for me. So be careful and don't measure your true success by somebody else's definition of that success, right?
Right. I always think of true success. I always think of it as being kind of a solar thing. Your self your sense of self-worth has to do with achieving those things that are important to you. And being materialistic is not necessarily important to everybody and may not serve the common good.
Exactly. But there's so much new age information out there right now that you can bring in money, you can bring in abundance and all that. And that's great if that's what you need to do, you know?
Right.
Because a lot of people think of money as like the road to, okay, if I have enough money and I can survive without having to go to work, I can spend all my time and energy on this one that I think is my own purpose in life, right? Mm-hmm. But that's not always the case. Look at all those people that won the lottery. So we think that money will give us the time so that we can put energy into what we really want to do. And some people will do that, but not everybody does. And actually we can find our real purpose just by going through life and, having a humdrum job, mediocre amount of money, because you're learning things as you go. And so don't, I don't know, I just wanted to say that about true success in money, because there's a lot of new age stuff out there. Money isn't the answer to everything. You know what I mean?
No, it's not. Really and there's nothing wrong with money.
There's nothing wrong with it.
Right.
But don't think that once you get that money, now you can do anything that you want, your soul's purpose. That's not usually how it works. Sometimes the easy way out is just not always what works for everybody. Right. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, probably you feel most successful. A person feels most successful when they're doing the thing that they're designed to do.
Exactly.
And that's kind of how you get a clue about what it is you're supposed to be doing. When you're doing something that makes you feel good.
Right. All right. So that is, real morality demands both actions on the physical plane that are in the direction of universal welfare, and other actions on the inner plane by the thought cells. Because the activities of the thought cells within the unconscious mind usually do not rise into the region of objective consciousness, the individual commonly is unaware of the forces at work on the inner plane that attract obstacles, friction, and even calamity towards a person's life. Thus, what circumstances and events are attracted into one's life is the result of the inner plane activities of the thought cells and thought structures of the astral body. I put in can be in part because I don't like absolutes. So I don't always like absolutes, and Zane has sentences that look like absolutes to me, so I put can be in part. Whenever you see these brackets, these are, this is what I've written of my own words, basically.
Well, so why do you question that? I'm curious.
The absolute that what circumstances and events are attracted into my life is due to the inner plane activities. Mm-hmm. Because I think that it can't just all be what's on the inner plane. I mean, it has to also be what's happening here in our physical world, right? And how we're reacting to the physical world and physical circumstances.
Right. Well, I can see that. I can also see where the physical experiences that you attract are the result of the magnetism created by the thought cells in your inner plane world.
Right, but just like he said before, some things are unforeseen that might not even show up in your chart. A big disaster like 9/11. I mean, we can't just look at all those people in New York City didn't have a huge, a huge thing in their chart to say, oh, there's a disaster coming. Yeah. So then people have to change, and now they might change their thinking, and then they might attracting other things based on physical and not just inner plane activities, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So I just don't like absolute. I think a lot of it, sure, but not everything. My opinion.
There you go. I like that.
Okay, so what these activities will be, the activities and events, I think, is determined by what the desires that the thought cells possess at that time. Just as the physical activities of observed behavior are due to the release of desire energies in thought cells. Okay, so what activities are attracted into your life is determined by what the desires that the thought cells possess at that time. Activities are due to the release of desire energies. Okay. Does that make sense to you?
Well, yeah, I think it's to me, I'm seeing it's a reiteration of
what we just talked about.
Yeah.
Right, okay. Right, okay. I guess this one is your observed physical behavior is the release of desire energy. So you're releasing it and you go in the direction, and then you can observe that behavior physically. And this one is, this is desire under tension attracting those events. So it hasn't been released yet. So that will attract your desires.
Right.
Okay, so now we're on to reconditioning. What the thought cells' desires are and how they release their energies are determined by the conditioning, which you remember from the past, feelings of pain or pleasure, of past experiences. Therefore, if we are to get these desire energies of the stellar cells to flow into more acceptable inner plane channels of expression, we must recondition the thought cells. So, in my opinion, that's also looking at where your thoughts and feelings are. Start looking at that. You'll start realizing where your desire energy is taking you, and then you can start reconditioning. Okay, so this is a subheading. Importance of events can be increased by giving the thought cells more energy. Like this. It's like more energy.
Hey, and then containing it, right?
Okay, so importance of energy is what I titled this subheading. There's a direct relationship between energy and work, and this relationship is as true on the inner plane as on the physical plane. No matter how effectively it is directed, one can only do so much work with a 20 horsepower engine. That's a 20 horsepower engine.
It's pretty weak.
Right.
By today's standards.
Right, by today's standards. And no matter how effectively it is directed, one can attract events of only so much importance because of a limited supply of energy of the thought cells working from the inner plane. So energy is going to be important in playing a role and stuff. It should be remembered that the birth chart shows only the amount of desire energy in the thought cells in each compartment of life as it existed at the time of birth. But the thought-building process of the astral body begins at birth for this human lifetime. So, this is what your birth chart shows in these compartments, and then you start beginning having physical experiences in this life that starts affecting you. So just remember that again about the birth chart. In other words, if sufficient thought and effort is devoted to it, by building new thought cells and reorganizing old thought cells in the astral body relating to some department of life, in spite of anything the birth chart shows, enough energy can be added to the astral body that will work to attract events from that department into the life. Does that sentence make sense, or kind of?
Does it make sense to you?
It does. I just wanted to make sure. It's a long sentence.
It's very long.
So I just I think that's what you were talking about, how we see, but again, he's talking about reorganizing thought cells.
All right.
And he's saying that if we do that, in spite of anything the birth chart shows, enough energy can be added to the astral body that will work to attract events from that department into the life.
Right. I think what he's saying is that whatever you choose, if you choose to work on something and you consistently work it and add energy and thought to what you're doing, you can put energy in places that you don't naturally have it.
Exactly. In my first class, I drew that chart like a pie chart, and then think of the pie chart, and then put your birth chart on it, and see where your planets are in that, in the 12 houses, and say you have a lot of planets in the career house, but you really want to have a better home. You want lots of things to do with your home. Even though you don't have like any planets in there, no energy, you can constantly put a lot of thought and energy into that.
Right.
area, and then you can kind of change where your desire energies is going from your birth chart, right? That's basically
I think that's what he's saying, yeah. You know, and the interesting thing is that for you to even think about, to notice something, that means there's something in your soul that's paying attention. That, you know, so you have a rapport with that thing you're thinking about. So it'd be easier to add desire energy to that thought, or
right.
Does that make any sense?
Yeah. So you're saying if you all of a sudden you become conscious that you really want a better home environment,
right?
Then there's something in your soul that's saying you should start thinking about that area.
Right. Like for example, I don't have anything in my second house.
Okay.
And so money has just never, it's just kind of one of those things I've never cared that much. I've never personally done a lot about money. I've been fortunate in attracting other people who are generous or whatever, you know, or that somehow, I obviously am able to bring money into my life, but as I've grown older, I realized, you know, I need to personally add some energy into that compartment of my thinking in order to be more well-balanced. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
And so
absolutely.
I try and think of, you know, I've tried to shift my thinking around. Now, it may not be conventional in the way I do it, but I think, you know, that's...
Yeah, great example. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, because for some reason, it's been brought to your consciousness that I
need
really
to balance myself.
Yeah. I think I need to pay attention to this area. So, yeah, that's cool. Did I already read this? Yes, I did. Okay, so the general rule is that the more energy possessed by the thought cells and thought structures, the more important, either favorable or unfavorable, the events will become relating to that department of life. And that's what you were just talking about. So you got to be careful it's not going to bring unfavorable stuff, right?
Yeah, that's not the plan.
Right. Sometimes you can't always.
Right.
Therefore, if a person considers it to be a more effective life by attracting events that are of greater consequence related to a specific department of life, exactly what you're talking about, Vicki, the thing to do is to work as energetically as possible to build experiences relating to that department of life into the finer astral body. Exactly what we're saying. One should think about the things of that department as well as feel strongly and as often as possible about them. So that feeling energy, again, that adds more energy, right?
Right.
And I have an example of a friend that really did that positive thinking thing about her career. She's had a lot of different jobs and very unsatisfied with jobs and stuff. So she actually did that. She wrote it down and she told me about it. And she's, I think she put that she wanted to find creative, monetary successful, and working with good people. That's what she kind of added. Well, it came to her, a job, and the people she worked with, her coworkers, were good people. She really got along with them. The work was creative, financially it was great, but her boss was a little crazy.
Oops, she forgot the 10th house component, right?
But we can't control everything. She could have totally stayed in that job because she really didn't work with her boss that much. It was, you know, she more worked with her coworkers, more so. She had to deal with her boss, but it wasn't all the time, you know. So what she believed in, it did come to her fruition. But then another job offer came, and, you know, like we all do, you know, so now she didn't put any thought or energy into that. She just took the next job, and then all, you know, different things happened. It wasn't great, and then another job. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's a lot of energy and time to just try to focus on all this, and I don't know. I like to just fly by the seat of my pants most of the time.
Well, you know,
what comes, you know?
Let those doors be open.
Exactly, because I don't think I'm always the best judge of what I should bring into my life. And that's one of the things about positive thinking. The example with my friend. It's like we can put a lot of time and effort and feeling into what we think we want, but we're not for sure if that's what's best for us, or if that's really what we want. When we get it, we decide, oh, that's not really what I want. You know what I mean? So that's why I like to let things happen as it goes. You know, I have one direction, a general direction I want my life to go in. But for the most part, I don't do that type of thinking. I don't know why. I'm like, no, maybe life knows better what it needs to give me than I think I need. You know?
That's so true. Along those lines, when I first started volunteering for the Church of Life, I worked with these two people, Lee Riffle and Lucille Truitt, and they were really old, and they were very wise people in many ways. And one of the things that I learned from them was that when you ask for something, always remember to ask for it within the laws of divine order.
I love it.
And so, I thought, oh, wow, that puts a whole new perspective on things.
Exactly. Because maybe the cosmic universe knows what's better for you to get through.
Right. But I think it's good to ask for things.
Sure.
That's how you build
Absolutely.
your character. You know?
Exactly. You ask for it, but for the highest good of, what did you say?
Well, it was divine order is what
Divine
they
order.
always place it in the context of.
Divine order. I love it. I totally agree with that. Okay. So back to that. Okay, so the planets prominent in a birth chart indicate thought organizations in the astral body possessing much energy. But the volume of energy present and available is mapped in terms of the total energy of one person's astral body rather than in terms that can be applied to all individuals. So when you're looking at your birth chart, the volume of energy, it's not like compared to everybody else. You compare it to yourself and your own total amount of energy available. That's what it's talking about. Oh, this came out. You know what this is a chart of?
It looks like your class.
It is!
Oh, how about that?
Did you try to read this?
Because I read that. I'm psychic.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty good, because I can barely read that myself when I go to her. At 3 o'clock today, at this location, this is the chart for it. And I thought it was interesting, because it looks like a lot of stuff going on in the career house.
Uh-huh.
And then our sun energy is in the 9th house, which is higher teaching, and higher education and learning.
The teaching planet is
Right. And Mercury, right?
Yeah.
And so I like doing these types of things.
Well, look at that. There's a nice trine between the Sun and Jupiter in the 5th house, so we're having a good time too.
Oh, that's good. I feel most relaxed today. For some reason, all my other classes a little more nervous than today. I'm just like, maybe this thing is getting easier as I'm going. Maybe that's what it is. But anyway, so that's the chart. Alright. Thus it is that from a birth chart, it is much easier to determine the special types of abilities possessed by an individual than to determine how far the individual will go in that development and application of the indicated abilities. But whatever a person does possess in the way of energies mapped in the birth chart, he has the power immensely to increase those energies by intelligently directed effort. Oh, I thought there was more to that. Oh, okay, never mind. And so, subheading, more fortunate events can be attracted by conditioning the thought cells to desire more harmonious expression. So now we're going to talk about conditioning. The conditioning energy, feelings of pleasure or pain, of the stellar cells and stellar structures of the astral body with such energy as they possess, determine what is attracted into the life. The experiences enter into discordant compounds of the thought cells when they are conditioned by feelings of distress, and they enter into harmonious compounds when they are conditioned by feelings of pleasure. I think he said the thought elements, but thought elements were experiences, if we remember correctly from the past. So. And when he's talking about compounds, isn't he just talking about like the elements that go into his thought stuff?
I think the way they blend with other thought elements, like the way Mars energy would blend with Sun energy. That becomes a compound.
Okay. So it's
or a thought structure, or
okay. Okay, so the aspects in the birth chart reveal the relationships that exist between the different departments of life. Aspects also reveal what type of conditioning energy compounds existed in the stellar cell in those departments of life at birth. Stellar cells and structures that have been conditioned by pain, when they release their desire energy, they use their psychokinetic power to attract into life similar painful things. I've heard so many people, I put this up there because I've heard so many people say, they tend to get the same type of people attracted into their life, and they have breakups, and why do I keep attracting the same type of person into my life, and why does it happen? Well, this is why it happens. Because you start putting energy, a lot of energy, like in a breakup, you put a lot of energy into the past relationship. And that is part of the reason the inner plane is working to attract that same type, because you put all this energy and thoughts and feelings and emotions, even though it was painful emotions. It doesn't matter. There's energy behind that, and that's what's going to be attracted back into your life. So you have to pay attention. Why am I attracting the same type of person, doing the same type of patterns over and over? I've heard it from so many people all the time. It's because you're attracting it by all this energy, and even though it's painful.
Well, right, and people in relationships tend to want to blame the other person for all problems rather than owning their own part of it.
There's two people in a relationship, 50-50. Right. Remember that.
You gotta clean up your mess before you can get something different.
Right, exactly. Yep. A physical habit that is once firmly established, no matter how detrimental it is, tends to follow a line of least resistance, which are the paths of association that have been previously formed. So also a discordant thought compound in the astral body that has become associated with a certain kind of pain, no matter what the effect upon the organism as a whole, it finds it easier to release its desire energy through pain-begetting channels. That is the habitual mode of expression.
Those are great images. I think you just about covered it.
And then this is the positive one. If therefore the individual expects to attract to him herself events that are more fortunate than those indicated by the aspects in the birth chart, he can change the conditioning of the thought compounds, which are merely mapped by those aspects in the birth chart. To the extent that he can do this, will more fortunate events come to him. So by conditioning him, now you're all healthy, you're married, and you can do whatever you want.
It's a perfect world.
Again, it should be pointed out that the birth chart indicates the manner in which the thought cells and organizations were conditioned at the time of birth from your past soul experiences. It does not indicate that their energies must remain conditioned in that particular way throughout one's life. So should those who would live more fortunate lives set about to recondition the misfortune attracting thought organizations of their astral forms, so that they will work no longer to attract disadvantages, but will energetically strive to bring into life advantageous conditions. Yet in the case of repressed desires, before energies can be reconditioned so that they will manifest through other channels, they must first be recognized by the objective consciousness. I think this is what I was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Start looking at where your thoughts are.
That's the hard part. Don't you think?
I don't know. I do a lot of thinking, and I think a lot of
sometimes I find I suddenly see something about myself that I've never been able, I never really, everybody else sees it, but I don't. And I go, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's that
right.
It's that thing,
Right. But see, then you can take that, and then you can change it.
Right.
If you don't like it. Or if you do like it, then you're going to,
enhance it.
Enhance it. No, I've actually changed a lot, the past couple of years by really paying attention to my thoughts.
Yeah.
And then it's becoming easier, I guess.
Right.
And so maybe, you know, yeah, I think at first it was hard because you're not used to going, where are my thoughts taking me? You know, what direction?
Well, what I had to do, I had a big lesson in the last few years, but was to really look at, I was having to pay attention to what was giving me pain.
Yes.
It's like, oh, duh, this is what I've been studying about all my life practically. I finally got it. It's like, oh yeah, must be something about that.
I think, and that's what I think, emotions or feelings are actually our teachers. And they keep hitting us. It's like a pinprick that keeps over and over and over and over again.
Right.
And you're not paying attention, you're just going about your life. And all of a sudden you go, why is that pain?
Yeah.
Why is that painful? And then you look at it and you're going, oh.
Right. There's something about me, you know.
Right.
It's not Mary. It's me.
Right. Something about me.
Right.
So I think it's easier to look at our things with the emotion. The emotion kind of, it can show us in what direction we like.
Mm-hmm.
Pleasurable, we want to go in that direction.
Right.
Pain, we want to look at it and go, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and it is a function of the birth chart to point out the thought compounds which attract difficulty. A discordant aspect indicates where there have been built elements that have entered into a disagreeable compound. And if the thought cells in the compartments ruled by these two planets partake also of this disagreeable quality, then they will have been conditioned by pain. Consequently, when the two departments of the life connected by an aspect are present in the thoughts, there is either consciously or unconsciously, and often both, a feeling of dissatisfaction and annoyance. So there we were talking about. Harmonious thinking and feeling about the things mapped by discordant planets in the birth chart will rearrange the thought elements, that's that rearranging thing, in the thought cells related to these things. An aspect basically maps a line across the astral body like an antenna, which picks up the quality of energy coming from whichever planets are indicated in the aspect. By reconditioning those thoughts and feelings around a discordant aspect, when successful, dissolves the old antenna, using regular words, and forms a new one, which is then able to pick up planetary energy that is free from static. That is, an aspect in the birth chart only indicates whether the thought compounds at its terminals, which is the either end of the aspect, are harmonious or discordant. But it also maps a line of astral substance like an antenna, which picks up such planetary energies either in tune or badly loaded with static. So he's kind of talking about aspects, and that's like an antenna, right? And how it brings in discordant or whatever. So we're looking at our birth chart as a map, and we're starting to analyze those things, what they're doing. Work always consumes energy. And it is the psychokinetic work performed by the thought cells from the inner plane that consumes the planetary energy which is responsible for attracting events into life. What events are attracted depends on how the energies have been conditioned and how that feeling is modified by the new energy reaching the thought cells from the newly formed receiving sets. And he often talks about receiving sets and stellar areolas, and I think he's all talking about the idea of an antenna.
Right. And that, I remember that was back in the 30s, you know,
Right.
it was a radio, and, you know, I think receiving sets, like if you're doing,
Yeah, like the box.
you have to be able to receive the
Right, like the
radio
actual
waves.
Right. Like the antenna is out there
Right.
to get all the broadcasts, but your receiving set is maybe your radio or what.
Well,
you're
actually, you know, our TV, our entertainment units, whatever, they always have a receiver.
Yeah,
Receiver.
right, exactly. So, and I like this little.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? You know what? And I had to train little rats one time, like, yeah, in a behavioral science class. And, you know, it's amazing how fast they figure that out.
This is what they're saying to each other. It's amazing. It's cool.
Wow, it works. Of course, they don't see you up there doing all this.
Yeah, like us is somewhere up here, like the god that they can't see. Little puppeteer. So the planets in the sky form good aspects and bad aspects at closely spaced intervals. Mars energy, Saturn energy, Jupiter energy, and all the other planetary energies are being broadcast from their respective stations constantly, even though at times somewhat stronger than at other times. It is not the energy being broadcast by the planets that affects us. What affects us is the type of energy being picked up by our own receiving sets, which are mapped by progressions in the birth chart, and then being added directly to our thought cells in the astral body. Those receiving sets, mapped by the position of the planets in the birth chart and by progressions, that are sturdy and well-defined areals, pick up the volume, which is the amount of energy, to which the antennas are tuned for. I think he gives an example. So the length of the aerial or antenna, which is the line across the astral body, mapped by an aspect, determines both the volume of energy picked up and whether it delivers it as a harmonious vibration to the thought cells at its two terminals, or delivers it so loaded with squared static that it gives them acute distress. As with the ordinary radio set, it is not the programs that are being broadcast at any given time that affect us, pleasantly or unpleasantly. It is the one particular program of many being broadcast that we tune in on that affects us. So all the planets are, giving their energy, but our antenna and what we're being tuned to is what affects us. Because, they're always, So, and the stellar aerial antennas extending across the astral body of an individual, such as mapped by the aspects, determine which programs of planetary energy we pick up on and add to our stellar cells of the astral body. No discordant energy from badly aspected planets on any given day can reach us unless we have the stellar aerials that are tuned discordantly to the programs of these discordant planets.
I like that thought.
Yeah?
I mean, I don't have to pay attention.
Right, there you go.
I can choose not to tune in.
My antenna is not picking up that program today. Thank you very much. I'm going to tune in on this better planetary energy. Okay, so conversion conditions the thought cells to work energetically to attract only favorable events. So now we're going to be talking about conversion. There you go. I'm recycling some of these cartoons.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Okay, so conversion. This is like the one definition of this chapter. So Zane's definition of conversion is the rearranging of thought elements within the thought cells and the rearranging of the thought cells within the thought structures without adding in any appreciable amounts of energy of a different family. So again, this is talking about rearranging things. Mm-hmm. And the only thing I can think of is like you're basically changing your thought patterns. I don't know. I guess it's maybe on a smaller scale. It's the little compounds and components that you're rearranging.
Well, it's like if you haven't. One of the aspects that I've had to work with, it's probably the worst aspect I have is my moon is square my ascendant.
Okay.
And so if I was going to apply conversion to that, I have to sort out, well, what's discordant about my domestic urges?
Huh.
And then try and rearrange that thinking and not go to the area of discord. Like, for example, I don't like, my moon's in the 9th house. The domestic duties that I have to do, and I'm very good at it.
Right.
I mean, I've had to get good at it.
Yeah.
That's not where I want to be. I don't want to be going there.
Right.
There are other things I'd rather be doing. But I've had to really work hard at learning to find, when I have to do a domestic duty, I really work hard to find pleasure in it. So I try and convert, so that it can stand alone as a pleasurable experience. And so I think that might be what he's talking about there.
Okay, so then, and over time then, have those experiences that you try to add pleasure to, even though not in general you like it.
Right.
Has that become easier as you went along with life?
Yeah. Well, when it really came into play when my daughter was born. because it also, my moon rules my 5th house. And so I had a really hard time adapting to being
Domestic.
yeah, because there were those there was a constant need there that I had to fulfill.
Right.
And so, it was really important to learn to find the pleasure and taking the time out to go and play with her and take pleasure in giving her good food. Not that it actually worked out, but I did work. I did try and work on all that.
Okay, so see, and in that
And it was
case,
the same kind. It was just taking the domestic urges and working with domestic urges.
right, because
And
you
trying to
can't
convert
avoid it totally in your
Yeah.
life. There's no way,
Right.
you know? Right, so you decided to convert it, or putting pleasure into the little things. So that
Right.
in general, it became a little more pleasurable and a little more easier to
Right.
do. Because
Right.
actually, there's things in our lives that we can't just avoid just because it looks, our birth chart showing, I want nothing to do with that. Doesn't matter.
Right.
Life is going to teach us things that we
Right.
need to be taught.
Right.
And it's difficult, but we learn it. I think that's great. Great example. So, and then the dictionary definition of conversion is to change from one form or function to another, to bring over from one belief, view, or party to another, to exchange for something equivalent. So that's, again, so in here when he's talking about basically the rearranging without adding any amounts of energy is conversion.
Of a different family. Of a
Oh,
different
okay.
thought. Like, for example, I wasn't taking Venus and trying to add Venus to lunar energy. I was really trying to work with the moon energy,
moon energy. Oh,
the domestic urges.
Right.
You know.
And you converted it into pleasure instead of
Yeah.
trying to avoid
Right.
it.
Right.
Okay, gotcha. That makes sense. So these antenna lines that a person's astral body, which the aspects in the birth chart progress towards map, are not due to planetary positions. They are due to the associations between the different groups of thought cells within the astral body. So the two planets that form an aspect, the associations between them, that's what's causing the aspect, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what he's saying? Such associations are energy relationships between groups that have caused the mental elements at each terminal to enter into a type of compound which is characterized by that association. So the aspect then points to the type of energy compound in the thought cells, unless something special has been done to change it since birth, like thinking a lot about another area of life. Okay, that's what we kind of... He reiterates a lot.
Yes, he does. But Maria Montessori says that's how we learn.
Okay. Repetition, right? And I got 2 hours to fill, and so I might as well go with what we got. If the organization of the thought cells is changed by reorganizing them, then the line across the astral body, which was developed originally at birth, will change, and the relationships between the aspects will change. So, again, the reorganization will change an aspect of this. For example, if you arrange the thought cells of thought elements that are mapped by a square aspect, you can transform the obstacle compound into a luck compound, such as mapped by a trine aspect between planets. That's what you're talking about, like where you can change
Except
it.
I thought it was an opposition and not a square.
Well, this is just one example. I'm sure
Yeah.
you can do either way. The same proportion of thought elements are present in each of these compounds. So again, that's where you're not adding appreciable amount of energy from another place. You're just rearranging the compounds.
Mm-hmm.
But those thought elements have been conditioned at the time of the formation of the obstacle compound, so that thoughts have arranged themselves to express a type of desire which works to attract obstacles into life. So the square aspect is the obstacle compound. When the thought cells are reconditioned through giving them at either terminal of the aspect, harmonious associations of greater energy volume and intensity than was given to them discordantly, the thought elements become rearranged in the thought cells and the old line across the astral body is dissolved. Ah, there it is. The thought cells become rearranged. This is how he's saying it. Just exactly like your example you said about your domestic urges.
Right.
You gave pleasurable thoughts to them. That's how you rearrange them.
Right.
Okay. That's starting to make sense.
It takes a lot of time to figure this stuff out.
As an outgrowth of the new compound, another antenna, not mapped in the birth chart, develops, which acts quite as effectively as the old antenna to pick up planetary energy. This new, deliberately built stellar aerial picks up the energies broadcast from the same two planets that the old one did. But it picks them up only in harmonious vibratory rates, which then works to attract fortunate events into life. Okay. Conversion is merely reconditioning the desires of the thought cells. This is the part where last week I had like 10 slides that I didn't do on sublimation. So I got a couple slides, this is from last week a little bit, so about sublimation. It is impossible to direct a flow of energy if one is unaware of that energy. So the first thing to be done is to recognize all the desires for exactly what they are. Then set about to condition them so that their energies will find satisfactory expression through moral lines of conduct. Then when the more suitable outlet for the energies of a desire has been chosen, the next thing is to systematically condition the desire to find greater satisfaction through this expression than through the old one. This is accomplished by associating with the new method of expression as many and as strong pleasures as possible. It's exactly what you're talking about. We had a great example there. Recognizing each desire for exactly what it is, and when you find a more acceptable channel, like some highly creative expression, by which the desire's own essential nature can express, will tend to avoid conflicts between the different sets of desires. One group of desires should not be set against another group of desires. And the reason for this is it causes conflict energy, which takes away your energy from going into one area, and you start to get this energy in conflict instead. I kind of just recently learned this about not trying to fight against everything. There's more energy going into that trying to fight.
Resist. Yeah.
Exactly. Whereas if you kind of let it come and kind of go around the other way, as opposed to go head on, straight on, you kind of just go with it. You can get a lot more accomplished by doing that. You know? Okay, so reconditioning desires. So sublimation and sublimating grosser desires, which the individual may be somewhat conscious of, the desires are conditioned through the use of pleasurable associations. This is done not so that their energies will fail to express, but so that their energies will be led into channels of expression that are favorable to the individual and the race. In conversion, a similarly sound psychological technique is employed, but the difference is that in conversion, we deal with desires that express on the inner plane as opposed to desires that express on the physical planes, as in sublimation. So, I can't believe he's just talking about it now. These are the two differences. Sublimation is conversion, we deal with desires that express on the inner plane, and sublimation, that's desires that express on the physical plane.
Right. Like that example that you were using at the beginning where you were talking about somebody made us, it was about food or something.
Oh, yeah. Renee, oh.
Yeah, taking it, you know, you have this desire that's manifesting in a material way.
Yes.
Like for a specific junk food.
Yes. Yes.
And learning to associate that hunger that you have with being satisfied with something that would be better for you.
Right.
That's hard to do, but you have to really work at that, I think.
Yeah.
But that's what I think that is that what sublimation is?
Exactly. And Renee gave that great example last week. Yeah, and then conversion is like using the astrology on the inner plane type of work. Great. The rearrangement of the thought elements and thought structures so that a new stellar antenna grows as a result are effects of the conditioning process and indicate the new energy relationships established. In other words, any condition within the astral body mapped in the birth chart or by progressions of any individual could be built into any other person's astral body if enough thought energy could be acquired and applied to it. So he's just, I think he's saying, like, if you find somebody else's birth chart and you like their aspect, you could apply it to yourself.
Why not?
Right. What comes to any individual is attracted by the organization of the thought elements and thought cells of one's astral body. It is not due to the planets. The planets do furnish the energy with which the thought cells work. The kind of work done by the planetary energy thus utilized is entirely determined by the desires of the thought cells and stellar organizations. That is, we build our fortune as well as our abilities through our experiences and how we mentally react to them. So the planets, it's almost like he's saying over and over again, the planets are like, it's the map that you look towards to understand what's going on in the inner plane.
Right. And I think it's a way of viewing energy, too. It helps to categorize energy.
Yeah.
Like you're thinking. Like, that's what I think I've really gotten a lot out of from my astrological studies, is learning how to associate a planet with a particular kind of energy that I'm engaged in, either on the thought level or behavior level. Mm-hmm. And when I can do that, I find that I'm able to, I think I understand it better. And then when I want to try and antidote it, it seems to work.
Yeah. So it's more like it's giving us a category to look at.
Right.
As opposed to just trying to figure out what our thoughts are doing.
A way of making it more concrete. Maybe.
Yes, exactly. And categorize it better. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think sounds good to me. Okay. So if we want a different kind of fortune, the only way we can get it is to build into the thought cells and thought structures of the astral body such desires as will attract it. So you have to have that desire for something to attract it. I have a friend that complains nothing ever happens good in his life. And I'm like, well, what do you want? She's like, I don't know what I want. I'm like, okay. Well, you're not going to get anything if you have no general idea of anything that you want.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah, what a cool picture. Events of importance come into life only when planetary energies in more than usual volume reach the thought cells. So, because on the astral plane, as well as on the physical plane, work consumes energy. The thought cells in the astral body can only do unusual work when they acquire from some source an unusual amount of energy. Such energy can be supplied by properly directed intense thought and feeling, but commonly is furnished by the planets. So I guess there's two ways you can get energy. When a progressed aspect forms within 1 degree of perfect, a temporary stellar aerial line develops across the astral body under a sacred law. This line connecting the two groups of dynamic stellar thought cells temporarily, progressions are temporary, which is as long as the aspect is within 1 degree of perfect, acts as a temporary stellar aerial to pick up the energies of the planets mapping its terminals. So in the birth chart we learned it's like the aspects don't change in your birth chart, right? But in progressions, they change. The aspects will develop temporarily and then they'll go away when it goes away.
They're more dynamic.
Yeah. The temporary line, acting as an antenna, picks up the energy either discordantly and loaded with static or harmoniously as tuned to the channel according to its line's length. He's adding more information that now we have to worry about length. This energy, whatever its nature, harmony or discord, is carried to the thought cells at the terminals, giving them both the impetus and the ability to perform unusual work. The energy they receive thus gives them a power they did not before possess to work on the inner plane. So I guess aspects that form during progressions, because they're temporary, they also give you temporary energy, either discordantly or harmoniously. It is not a difficult thing to determine when unusual events affecting a certain department of life, of the individual's life, will come to pass. They come to pass when progressed aspects are within the degree of perfect. But it is entirely another thing to determine how much benefit or how much distress will be coincident with the aspect. Events worthy of being noted are always indicated by appropriate progressed aspects. Why is he saying it's entirely another thing to determine how much benefit or distress will be coincident with the aspect? Can't you tell by the nature of the aspect?
Unless you've reconditioned it.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah,
You think that's what he's talking
That
about?
sounds right, yeah. Because otherwise you'd be able to tell if it's an opposition or a square or a trine, you know.
Or how much volume. I mean, you may be a person. I may be a very low energy person, so when an aspect comes along, not much happens in my life.
Okay.
Because I'm not out doing much.
Okay. And like you said, and then you can recondition it so
You
that
can learn
there's
it.
a bad aspect that comes as a progression, but it doesn't affect you at all. You're reconditioned it into another area. Okay, so if the stellar cells affecting a department of life have been conditioned harmoniously at birth, the planetary energy they receive will build up their desires until they spill into definite interplane actions. But they have been so strongly conditioned to work through channels favorable to the individual that they do not know how to work in any other way, in spite of the discordant static they may receive with the new energy supply. Okay, so if you have harmoniously conditioned aspects, then, but I think that's exactly what we just said. If a square comes along in progression and it shows, you know, an obstacle, I think that's what he's saying, right? Conditioned harmoniously, this is not going to affect it. On the other hand, if the thought cells reached by the new energy supply have been conditioned at birth to feel distress, and to find an outlet for the desires only through actions detrimental to the individual, no matter how harmonious the new energy added may be, they will not work entirely in beneficial ways. But they will not act so disastrously as to attract misfortune, but neither can they feel joy. So in other words, he, basically he's saying if it's a harmonious aspect, and even though a progression comes along and it's an obstacle, then it's not going to affect you that much. And if it's a bad aspect, then it's not going to attract as much misfortune as you expected it.
As it might otherwise.
Because they have been so strongly conditioned to attract pain, the desire can only find satisfaction in some measure of discord. Astrological research proves that conditioning of the thought cells and thought structures in the astral body determines the nature of their inner plane activity, then does the discord or harmony of the energy they receive during the progressed aspect. Okay, that's basically what you just said. Alright, so 5 methods employed to rule the stars. A person attracts differently when in distress than when experiencing pleasure. And this distress or pleasure, if prolonged, leaves a permanent impression. The quality of the energy thought cells receive over a temporary area tends to condition them in a particular way. The progressed aspect may not have sufficient conditioning energy to rearrange the thought elements in the thought cells to any great extent, but through feeling, it gives them desires they normally would not have. The 5 methods of control of these desire energies in the thought cells are manipulating the physical environment, conversion, mental antidotes, grounding forces, and character vibrations. I think this is the first book where he's talking about these things. That's why he goes into it so in depth, right?
Probably,
Yeah. So, method 1, manipulating the physical environment. The Earth is subject to different weather conditions simultaneously in different regions. And the energy delivered to the thought cells in a certain compartment in the astral body, influencing a department of life, acts as an astral weather condition affecting one region strongly and perhaps another region not at all. That is, it may affect money but have no influence over the health or affections at all. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
The activities of the stellar cells from the inner plane can only bring such events into life as the physical environment makes possible. If the physical environment is so arranged that a certain type of event cannot happen, it will not happen, no matter what the birth chart and progressed aspects are. So that makes sense. That is, the thought cells can only do so much work from the astral plane as they have energy to accomplish. And if there is sufficiently high environmental resistance to a particular event and not enough energy is required, then events that would otherwise be attracted do not happen. Method 2, conversion. I think he gave an example. Maybe it's later.
Of manipulating the environment?
Yeah, about like if you have a birth chart that's similar to an Eskimo and a guy as an editor. I think I have it in one of these. I remember putting it in there. Maybe it's later. We'll just go on. Okay, method 2, conversion. The progressed aspect indicates a line giving different groups of thought cells associations they did not before possess, as well as adding to them planetary energy. Oh, okay. So 2 things going on. Gives them planetary energy and the associations between those 2 planets. Such energy relations, if permitted to set up strong trains of thought and to attract characteristic events, may cause changes in the thought compounds. But instead of permitting such changes, if they are not advantageous, and instead of permitting thought cells' desires, which are disadvantageous to develop, through predetermined thought associations, the thought elements within the cells receiving the additional energy supply can be rearranged and their desires so conditioned as to make it easier for them to work to attract fortunate events than those of misfortune. Wow, that's a mouthful. That is a sentence. The nature of the work done from the inner plane is determined chiefly by the thought compounds that go into making up the thought cells. Changing those thought compounds give those cells a different type of activity. In conversion, the attempt chiefly is to rearrange the thought elements already present within these compounds. So again, conversion is like the rearranging activity. Method 3. Oh, there's mental antidotes. What are we talking about here? In conversion. Why is he talking about conversion and mental antidotes? Did I miss something? Did I just read this? I guess I did, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is method 3, mental antidotes. And I just read this slide, so I don't know why he's talking about conversion when we're talking about mental antidotes. He does that all the time.
I think was he just comparing?
Maybe he was. Maybe it was just a comparison of mental antidotes and conversion. But in this method of mental antidotes, there are mental elements called mental antidotes. Okay. That when added to a thought compound containing another specific thought element, unite with it and quickly change the compound into one harmless or even beneficial. Thus, the work of changing a dangerous or difficult thought cell compound into one that is harmless or advantageous is much easier through the use of proper mental antidotes. If a compound is to be changed by mental antidotes into a highly beneficial type of activity, conditioning through giving the compound harmonious feelings also is necessary. So you still have to add that pleasurable feelings to it, I guess, when doing mental antidotes.
Right.
Mental antidotes, because cultivating a type of experience or thought suffices, without the necessity of giving so constant attention to intense feelings of pleasure, are the easiest applied of all methods of changing the composition of the thought cells beneficially. Giving so constant. Okay, so you still have to give it pleasurable feelings, but it doesn't have to be so constant and intense as you do in the other way, I guess. Method 4, rallying forces. The nervous system of man, through the electric currents flowing over it, is tuned by his thoughts to pick up radio fashion the type of planetary program corresponding in harmony or discord, and in type to these thoughts. That is, the individual can tune himself to feel rather intensely in a certain way, and the electric currents flowing over his nerves then pick up energy of this quality radiated from one or more of the planets. Such electric currents also serve as conductors, carrying the astral energy thus received to all the stellar areals of the astral body. So long as a particular state of feeling is maintained, the chief astral energy received by the stellar cells at the terminals of all the areals is of this particular planetary type and of this harmony or discord. Thus can be controlled to the extent the individual can direct his feelings, the type of planetary energy, and the harmony or discord of that energy, which is transmitted to the stellar cells in his astral body.
Does that make sense to you?
I'm not sure. I have to think about it later on. But I think this is the first time he talks about rallying forces. I don't know. Maybe he did in previous books, but as it is easier to keep the consciousness tuned to some areal already present in the astral body than merely to develop and hold a certain feeling, birth chart aspects and progressed aspects may be used to indicate the rallying forces, as they are called. As inharmonious birth chart and progressed aspects also map areals that may tune the consciousness in on discordant rallying forces, these indicate clearly what feelings should be avoided to prevent discordant energy being delivered to the thought cells. A certain feeling developed and maintained tunes the person in so completely on a specific wavelength and program that other wavelengths and programs are not strong enough to make their influences felt at the receiving sets. Do you understand, like, rallying force? Can you give me, like, a general? I mean, I'm reading this, but I'm kind of going, huh?
Well, I think it's that, have you ever been so excited about doing something?
Oh, yeah.
This may be an example.
Okay.
You're so excited about doing this thing that there are all these sub-issues surrounding it that could divert you or make you feel negative about it or whatever, but you're so focused on this powerful feeling of, I want to do this, or I want to feel a particular way, that all that other energy, after you've held that for so long, pretty soon you don't even notice this other stuff, and it's just funneling energy into this thing you want to do.
Right. Like, okay, yeah, that makes sense to me now. So that's kind of like what rallying forces are.
Right.
Like, I had this desire to go visit Europe, like, a couple of years ago, and, didn't matter, like, I didn't have enough money, or the time wasn't there, or whatever. I didn't even think about all those other little divergent things. I just I really wanted to go to Europe, no matter what. And then it manifested, after, like, I don't know, a year or so, a couple of years,
Right.
And it was so, this feeling of excitement to just do it, like, just took away, like, all that other stuff. I didn't worry about it, and then it eventually happened, that type of thing.
So, and I think when you're trying to apply that to your birth chart, it may not be so easy, because when you're really excited about something, that's just automatically going to siphon off energy.
Right.
So that's what you have, when you're working on your chart, you have to get excited about this thing that you're wanting to recondition.
Okay. Okay, I can see that.
And so when aspects come along that are of a similar nature, then that energy will just go funnel into that idea that you hold that you want to be or achieve.
Okay, that makes sense. So this does not, to any extent, change the composition and therefore the basic desires of the thought cells, but it does temporarily cause them to feel either better or worse than usual, and gives them energy with which to do more than usual amount of work. That makes sense. And then method 5, character vibrations. Not only our human associations by their thoughts, but all the objects and conditions of our environment are radiating astral vibrations which are similar to those that reach us from the planets. Associates. Okay, so like other thoughts of other people and other conditions of our environment they are giving us energy as well as planetary vibrations. Okay.
Imponderable forces.
Imponderable forces, okay. Such astral vibrations, not those of thought and not those from the planets, are called what? Oh. Okay. I should have rearranged that sentence. So, such astral vibrations, not those of thought, not those from the planets, are called character vibrations. So he's basically saying that thoughts from other people are character vibrations.
I think that's what he said.
He says things in like, not this or not that, and then you go, oh, so what is it? Is that what he
Thoughts, objects, and conditions, not planets.
Right. That's planetary vibrations.
Mm-hmm.
So character vibrations are more like not the astral vibrations, and not those of thought, and not those from the planets. Not those of thought.
Oh, not those of thought.
Okay.
Well, character vibrations, I think, have to do with the people.
People around you. Okay, okay. So you radiate an energy to me right now, and it's just your character vibrations.
Right. And if you were really down and I came in and I said, oh, she's really down, maybe I can do something to help her lift her spirits. Or I could say, oh, she's really down and that's where she likes to be. And
right?
I can or ignore you anymore.
Right? Or I've done the opposite, where I've been in very good mood and good spirits, and I walk into work and somebody's in a really nasty mood.
Right.
It just kind of brings it, it just affects you.
Right.
So that's character vibration.
I think so.
Okay, that makes sense. Such astral vibration, oh, I just showed that, okay. And any such invisible energy reaching the astral body of the individual stimulates into additional activity the thought cells of the astral body, having the same vibratory tone. Okay, so if I'm excited and happy, somebody comes along and they're excited and happy, they're adding, oops.
You're having a lot of fun at that time, aren't you?
Right? Then they're adding additional energy, and I'm like, oh, yay. Okay. So, names, numbers, tones, colors, types of environment, etc. radiate definite vibratory rates, and thus influence those with whom closely associated. They may therefore be selected for the specific effect they will have in furnishing a definite kind of energy to the thought cells. How to rule the stars. Now we get into the gist of it. Alright. Experiments carried out in a dozen universities have now conclusively demonstrated psychokinesis, which is the non-physical power of the mind to move physical objects and bring about physical conditions. This psychokinetic power is not confined to the unconscious mind as a whole, but is exercised also by each group of thought cells within the unconscious mind. Whether the events that come into the light are fortunate or unfortunate depends upon the desires of these thought cells. Okay, I'm going to read you something to this effect that I just heard about on listening to late night radio. This guy, Rick Collingwood, an Australian hypnotist, he was talking to the host about all these things, but there's a paragraph here that I'm going to read to you that he said word for word. In the 50s, when they invented the electron microscope, they went looking for the terms that make us psychic. Scientists said we have receptors for the 3D dimension that we live in, the eyes, ears, nose, mouth, and skin. And so they said if we have psychic abilities, then we must have receptors for them. And they defined these receptors as cells and groups of cells that can receive and interpret electromagnetic stimuli. And they found we have millions of these cells all over our skin, and we have receptors in our nose that can smell other people's emotions and intentions. And these things tune in, and you can learn how to tune them in, or sometimes they will just spontaneously tune them in. I think that is fascinating. If it's true. I mean, that's what he said, you know, you have to go find out where those things were published, I guess. But I mean, if that's true, then that kind of correlates Zane's stuff about, you know, thought cells and thought energy. Mm-hmm. It's just that with the electron microscope, I guess they found those cells. And I guess we can all use that and be more psychic, you know. we just have to learn how to use them. It's just like we only use supposedly 10% of our brain, right? What's that other 90% going for? I guess if we learn how to use it, then we'll be using it a lot more. Maybe that's part of what controls our psychic energy that we haven't learned to use yet.
Right.
And maybe we can just keep learning and we can get more and more psychic, I guess.
Right.
I think it's interesting.
Well, and that's what the whole concept of affirmations is all about, right? Or like your friend, the example you used of your friend who demonstrated a job that had particular qualities that she was seeking or thought she was seeking.
Right.
And she molded into the environment.
Right.
But through her thinking. You know, people do it all the time.
Right. And they don't know what they're doing.
Right.
Like, we're learning how that this all plays a part and it plays a role.
Right.
But, yeah, people do it all the time without knowing what they're doing. They don't know how it works. They just say, I know this works.
Right.
Yeah. And scientists, I think there's a lot of stuff out there, information-wise, that have been discovered. And that's just not... It's not written about.
It's just not integrated into a system that we all can understand.
Yeah, it's just interesting. So,
You didn't read it.
yeah, I did. Whether the events that come into the life are fortunate or unfortunate depends upon the desires of the thought cells. The psychokinetic power.
Are there any inputs from the peanut gallery?
Any inputs from the peanut gallery?
Because sometimes they have really interesting things, examples to offer.
Right. Nothing? Okay. Yeah, I actually did just read that. Right? Still interesting all the same. Good luck is due to the psychokinetic power of harmonious thought cells within the finer form, and that's the astral body. And bad luck is due to the psychokinetic power of the discordant thought cells within the finer form. That's
That makes me nervous.
Really?
I feel fried
Thus, what comes into our life is not due to the positions of the stars, either at our birth or after our birth. It is chiefly due to the psychokinetic activity of the thought cells within our astral bodies. If we would rule our stars, therefore, in addition to manipulating the physical environment intelligently, we must change the thought cells' activities. Okay, now he's saying, before he was saying it comes in based on our desires. Now he's saying it's due to psychokinetic activity. Maybe does it tie in?
You describe.
No, you say it because I think you have a better train of thought.
Well, no, your psychokinetic activity is determined by your desires.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. Assuming that's what he means. Okay.
Yeah.
And then that psychokinetic activity attracts what the desires are automatically. It's already doing that psychic work.
I think that's the mechanism of the desires.
Oh, okay. Alright. So when these activities are altered, the change in our character cannot fail to bring a corresponding change in the events and conditions of attracting. So when these activities are altered, like the desires of the attracting kinetic energy, thus to change the thought cells' activities, their desires must be changed. Okay, it does tie it in. Such desires can be reconditioned, as can the desires more commonly recognized. Okay, can all be changed.
That's what he said. I'm sure hoping that's true.
Right. This may be done through rearranging their thought elements in conversion, through adding new thought elements in mental antidotes, to form a new and beneficial mental compound, through delivering to the thought cells different character vibrations as energy for their work, and through supplying them with a different type and quality of planetary energies termed rallying forces, which tends to condition the thought cells so that they desire to perform the work decided upon. Okay, so that sentence is all just a reiteration of the 5 methods of the changing the conditions of the thought cells. Wow, that's it. Okay.
Ta-da!
I guess that is it. Yes, sir. I don't know, is there anything people are saying, Barb?
Any questions? Any anecdotes?
Yeah. Nothing? Okay. Can you come back over here, Barb? So we can end it. No, it's just oops, I'm going backwards. It's just the end of the class, and it's 20 minutes early. I don't know, is there any other bits of information? See, it's hard to do these classes because last week we got in some great conversations with Allie and I couldn't even finish my PowerPoint, and this week I'm done 20 minutes early, so.
Was there anything in particular as you were going through this material that you found intriguing or questioned?
Well, I kind of like that he kind of reiterated that it's not so much the planets in our birth charts that are causing things. I mean, they give us energy. They give us planetary energy.
Right.
But it's not the charts that we make, the progressed aspects and progressed charts and birth charts. We look at them, but they're just a map.
Right.
And there's one time that I noticed it was written. I used to read astrology books, and I'd read about my sun sign, and then I found out what my chart was. So I'd read all about, the planet in this means this, and it would give a little bit of paragraph. And I remember reading one thing, and I said, oh yeah, that used to be when I was a lot younger. That totally doesn't even affect me anymore. Like, it doesn't even have an effect on my life. But I remember when I was younger, it did. So it's almost like, it's almost like if you learn a lesson and you get through it, it no longer plays a role in your life anymore. You don't have to give it energy.
Right.
And I think that's the Zane saying that, it's not the planets affecting you all the time. That it's like your reaction to life, your reaction to the environment. Planetary energy, yes, gives you energy, but it's like you have control of your life, and you attract into your life what really your thoughts and emotions and feelings are directed in that energy, in that direction.
What do you do with it?
Exactly, what you do with it.
Right.
And to me, it's very empowering that I can change, things. And it's a very effective tool. I think, we all have bad things going on in our life, and we want it to change. Well, we can change it.
Right.
We can use our thoughts and our feelings and emotions and change it, And I think that's very empowering, Zane's stuff. What I like. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting, and I think it's in Imponderable Forces, where he has, he does a little pie chart, or I think he does a pie chart, or he, conceptually communicates a pie chart, and he divides the chart into, your own thinking, the impact of your own thinking, the impact of astrological energies, the impact of the people around you, and I think it's like 50%. Of life, of your energy is devoted to your own thinking. That's how much power you have, and it could even be more than that.
Yeah,
I think it is more. I don't remember what the percentage is, but you go through reading all this stuff, and you're thinking, oh, there are all these occult forces that play in my life. And really, when you get at the end of this whole process, you realize it's still about me and my thinking. I don't care what my chart says.
Exactly. Right.
That's where the power is.
Right. Yeah, he gives us like different methods of like conversion, sublimating, all that, of doing these things. But yeah, it's like changing your thinking can do amazing things. Simply put.
Right. Yeah.
Because Zane is all about the wordiness. You know what I mean?
He does have a few words to throw around.
Neil put in, he says, everything was explained very well, a new perspective on an old book. And
Cool.
He said, great illustrations.
Oh, that's great, Neil. Oh, I'm so glad. That's what this class is about. Helping us all understand this stuff.
Yeah, it's fascinating to go through it all again.
Yeah, rearranging the sentences and stuff. Well, I think if we're good, I think we can just end a little early.
Yeah.
Is that fine?
Yeah, that's
I
good.
think that's fine. So thanks everybody for joining in. Who are some of the names, Barb? You wanna?
Neil and Dorothy and Paul.
Neil and Dorothy and Paul.
Signed up.
Hi y'all. And hi everybody else who signs on later and watches this later. All right, I think we're good, Barb.